Hello, everyone. This is Kripa Anand, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are analyzing the modern architecture of the employee experience, real time feedback loops, and automated cultural enablement. In 2026, building a hyper resilient organization requires looking past rigid annual reviews to install continuous AI driven listening models and structured rewards programs that protect your talent assets and actively amplify workforce output. Joining us today is Rob Catalano, co founder and chief engagement officer at WorkTango. Rob is a globally acclaimed human resources technology pioneer with over 20 years of leadership experience building and scaling industry defining platforms. A foundational member of the original team at Achievers, where he drove international growth for over a decade, his deep obsession with the employee journey led him to co found WorkTango in 2015. Named one of the top 100 global employee engagement influencers in 2026, he is a definitive global authority on workplace culture. So, before further ado, let's welcome this very special guest. Rob, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Yes, thanks for having me. Excited to be here, and it's always embarrassing listening to the intros.
It's well deserved. And, Rob, for decades, corporate human resource departments have relied on, massive once a year employee surveys to gauge the general health and satisfaction of their workforce. So let's start the conversation by understanding, from your perspective, why are annual employee surveys no longer effective? And if they are no longer effective, what is? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I've been saying this for 15, 10 years, and unfortunately, organizations still conduct an annual engagement survey as the primary or sometimes only way to understand sentiment or to gauge the sentiment of an organization. And I mean, it's very obvious to me why they're no longer effective. One is there's really no accountability to act, right? If you're not
Right.
checking in whether things are working or not working, you don't have accountability, your leaders don't have accountability. There isn't really that measurement on measuring the engagement of the employees. And I think a big part of that, the second big reason is that I find engagement surveys or the annual survey is just measuring sentiment. It's
Mhm.
not getting diagnostic feedback about what's happening in the organization at that moment in time, right?
Hmm.
So when you talk about well, what works, well, I see a lot of organizations move from this annual world, not to pulsing and just doing the same surveys every month or every quarter or every couple of weeks, but doing it in a more frequent way with that diagnostic feedback, right? What's working, what isn't? Let's get feedback on a new initiative that we just launched. Is it hitting the mark or is it not? Or let's get feedback for something we're going to launch so we can get it right. So I see a lot
Hmm.
of organizations that change that strategy, not just more frequent than annual, but diving deeper into more of a diagnostic world. That's when you see rubber hit the road and when you see, action start taking place, a lot more accountability. Um, Last thing I'll say is a lot of
Mhm.
organizations look at this survey process as an HR initiative, but the
Yeah.
reality is it's so important to get that data to your leaders. So in terms
Right.
of what works, companies that I've seen be successful in changing that strategy from annual to more active listening is the data isn't sitting in this filter with HR. It's going directly to the leaders to see their teams, departments, locations, whatever it is, to then start understanding, well, what would they do and kind of bridge the time from listening to action, right? Last thing
Mhm.
I'll say is when we see a lot of companies hear this narrative, what they say is, well, people get survey fatigue. We know we're never going to do more surveys. But the reality is people don't get survey fatigue, they get lack of action fatigue. So as long as you have
Yes.
a good action process in place, I've seen companies that do weekly surveys and still find so much value in the approach.
Right. No, definitely. This is a very unique perspective and also an unsaid joke in the corporate environment, right? That anything survey related must be an HR initiative. But I understand and see the value that, comes along with this as well. And what you said at the end, it's not the survey fatigue, it's the action fatigue. Because getting someone to actually fill the survey with the right intent is, what makes or breaks that decision. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's funny. One of the questions I always
Yeah.
recommend at the end of a survey is ask employees Do you feel action will be taken place as a result of this survey? Because then you get their
Hmm.
real sentiment, but then ask them, did you see action based on your last feedback? It's very, very clear and an easy answer and easy to understand whether you have your action plans right, or at least your
Right.
communication of what you learned. So just a small nuance and how you could turn that into a better listening experience.
Definitely. And I think for employees specifically, this is more of a mindset thing as well, right? Because when they're given a survey to fill out, this might also feel like just an additional task that they have to just, get it done with. So to get the honest answers is something that leaders and HR and everyone will have to work together to, get this thing right. But now, uh, service is one thing, but when we talk about the action and the feedback, artificial intelligence is taking over this area as well, and changing how we look at it. So let's explore how AI turns employee feedback into actionable leadership insights. So Rob, how can AI turn employee feedback into something that we can actually on ground take action for as well?
Yeah, so I can share a number of ways, and I've had so much fun the last probably year and a half, or almost 2 years, implementing AI into these listening strategies to do all the things you just mentioned. How does it help with understanding the feedback
Yeah.
or getting to action? So a few ways I've seen it provide so much value in a listening strategy. One is the whole world of open-ended comments, right? We know it's hard to read hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of comments, but that's where the real information is, right? You need more than just how do you feel out of a scale of 1 to 5. You want to know the why you feel that way or what you recommend. But everyone knows it takes forever to go through all those comments. So AI has really enabled organizations to, in real time, understand themes, understand sentiment, right? Positive, negative, neutral, by allowing those summaries to happen in a very real time way. And again, not just at the HR level, but leaders coming in and potentially seeing what are the themes that's on the mind of my teams, because those themes might be different than other teams in the organization. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one way where AI has really made that a much easier and faster approach to understanding versus just listening.
Yeah.
Second is taking all that quantitative data, right? How do you get
Mm.
summaries of where sentiment is high or where it's low, where it might be trending versus where it's not trending? Actually, just about a year ago at our organization, WorkTango, we launched something called WorkTango Coach, and we call it an analyst in the pocket of HR, where they can ask, what's going on with the marketing team in India? Well, now I can get
Oh,
that information in a more just an easier prompt level versus diving through a number of dashboards like the typical way it used to be done. So
right.
those are just some of the ways on the, I'm going to call it the listening and understanding side of things, that AI has really made a big impact. But I think the biggest ones are more on the action side of things. So, for example, I just mentioned that WorkTango coach. It's actually recommending learnings and actions to leaders based on the sentiment of individual teams. So now, when AI can nudge leaders with what's working, what you could do differently, what's not, it's a whole different ability to open up that speed to action and more focused, plans versus an HR leader meeting with every every leader in the organization, which takes weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
But those are just some examples. And then one thing I'm really excited about is the last thing about how AI is supporting is how do you go through the right questioning schemes? And what I mean by that
Mm.
is how does AI go down a different journey of asking questions to, let's say, yourself versus me, and those being different based on the feedback that we give. So AI is moderating conversations in a much better way than static survey linear processes.
Wow, I think those are great insights, because that is also very interesting, because right now a lot of founders that I talk to, they are also starting new companies with their workforce being all the AI agents. So from that perspective, when we run a survey with all the AI employees, how do you think the feedback and the assessment is going to you know turn out there? Because this is not even a thing of future, this is happening in real time as we're speaking right now. So AI is the one giving the surveys, AI is the one taking that survey. So how do you think that is going to paint out in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I haven't seen many examples of companies that are at that space yet, but think about it,
Which
right?
is
We're
sprouting,
listening,
yeah.
but we're listening to our technology already, right? It's working, it's not working, there's errors.
Yes.
But AI can do more than just tell you there's an error. It might tell you the things that cause that error. It might
Right.
get to the root cause a lot easier. So I don't think it's, far in between. And I also
Yeah.
think AI is getting beyond just filling out survey boxes. Have a conversation with an AI agent and it can understand how you feel about work in a quick 1 minute call versus filling out a 16 question survey. So I think we're going to get there. A lot of
Right.
organizations are still figuring out their agents, let alone asking them sentiment about what's working or
Yeah.
not. But who knows? Maybe that's a new next product line we can put out
Yeah,
in
that's
the coming
very
coming
interesting.
months.
Very interesting. Now, Rob, when we talk about HR, the definition of being a leader or team culture, these are the words that come into your mind naturally. But every business has a different definition of what that feels like or what that is. So, from your perspective, let's now look at building a culture of appreciation that also drives performance, because it's the psychological motivation that one is getting, the extrinsic motivation, right? So how do recognition programs improve retention and productivity according to you?
Yeah. So first off, you're right. Recognition is one of the biggest drivers of engagement and retention. And I've seen it for the last 20 years with organizations I've worked with. There's so much research on it. We could probably spend 3 hours on this call. We won't bore people with all that.
Right.
But it does have impact. And I've even seen data of companies where organizations that have employees at higher levels of recognition moments have way higher retention rates, as well as years of service in organization. So there's a lot there, but I think if you go back to just brass tacks, and you mentioned it briefly there, is that when you look at the theory of human motivation, and I hate bringing up Maslow on HR, type conversations, but
Yeah.
first off, think about it. It was the theory of human motivation, not the theory of employee motivation, right? They were
Yes.
humans way before they were employees.
Right.
But what's interesting about that is when you get through the base needs, and you move up the ladder of Maslow's hierarchy, that whole appreciation and recognition is way higher than things like compensation and the things that are at the bottom end. So
Yeah.
right there's a lot of proof that being recognized is a reason why people would want to stay with an organization or see impact on what drives companies. But the reality is companies today take the wrong approach. They think recognition is recognizing people for breathing once every 5 years because they stuck it out for 5 years, or these top down, let's come up with the employee of the month or employee of the year, and no one knows how this was selected. It's just
Yeah.
this top down approach is where people people don't feel that appreciation. It's more the
Yeah.
day to day, peer to peer appreciation that
And
that
it also
drives
might
that.
fuel office politics, if not anything else, right? So,
Yeah, fair, right? Like it's
yeah,
more of it shouldn't be a popularity contest. It should be,
exactly.
when you see great work, don't wait 364 days till the next, company event to recognize
Yeah.
someone. Do it specific and meaningful and timely when it happens.
I think when you look at all these things, these are the basic human things that, are being applied to in a business setting, and that is showing actual results that, take a company from zero to that, 1 million journey. So that's amazing. On this note, I'd like to give a special message to all of our listeners now, specifically to all the founders, HR directors, and scaling corporate leaders watching. In 2026, managing your workforce with blind intuition is an operational liability. Rob and his elite team at WorkTango are completely revolutionizing the employee experience workspace. Their comprehensive AI-powered platforms unifies real-time pulse surveying, life cycle tracking, and global peer recognition onto a standalone, frictionless platform. By connecting employee input straight into actionable leader dashboards, WorkTango replaces manual guesswork with automated insights by location, department, and team. Backed by their global rewards network featuring premium redemption options from Amazon to Apple, WorkTango empowers brands to drive wellness initiatives, training participation, and measurable spikes in talent retention. So, if you are ready to stop guessing your internal turnover risk and start building a high performing culture of appreciation, visit worktango.com today to request a live demo. secure your ultimate competitive advantage by optimizing your people operations. Now, coming back to you, Rob, connecting everyday workplace achievements to tangible global reward network platform, it transforms a simple thank you into a powerful engine for employee retention, and that is magic, right?
Yeah,
Now,
and I
yeah,
think the one thing I'll add is, you'd mentioned the intrinsic motivation of recognition. I think where
yes,
many companies get this wrong is they focus on the extrinsic reward and say, "Hey, you've been here for a year or 5 years. Here's a couple of rewards that you may or may not even like." And they
yeah,
focus so often on the cost associated with the reward that gets into people's hands. But the
yeah.
magic is when you combine them together, right? When you have
Mm.
intrinsic plus extrinsic, you get that amplifier where people feel, right, that higher level of motivation based on being recognized, but they also have something to look at that identifies, a reminder of the hard work they do. And what gets recognized gets repeated. It's not always what gets rewarded gets repeated.
Definitely. That's $1 million advice right there as well. Now, Rob, let's explore using incentives to boost engagement, learning, and wellness. We talked about a mixture of intrinsic and extrinsic, right? But when it comes to incentives, how can incentives boost employee training and engagement according to your perspective?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite topics. If we think about, some of the first recognition platforms, like you said, back when I was at Achievers, like 20 years ago, it was really all about recognition of corporate values and rewarding those. And that's still important. It's critical. We want to make sure that there's more of those recognition moments to amplify the values, behaviors, things that are important in your company. But what I've seen evolve over the last decade is this concept of incentives, and it's around driving other business results that your company cares about, right? So when I say other business results, maybe as an HR team, you want more referrals from your employees because that's way less expensive than having to go out and get, a third party to do that, and a recruiter to do that. If you're the marketing team, maybe you want employees to post things on social media or share a recent, product that was released, so you're getting more eyeballs on this new product to drive sales. Maybe it's just getting, more people to be involved in using AI, right? And some of those goals. But the idea is that how do you have a structure around incentivizing not just the
Mhm.
behaviors and values, but the actual results you want to see, like some of the things I just mentioned? And what's interesting to me is many companies do this already, but it's happening, just in little parts across the organization. Some are happening through credit cards, some are happening through a pizza party, some are happening, just by a leader, but
Yeah.
there's no strategy for it. But when I see companies consolidate that into a more holistic recognition and reward strategy, that's when they start seeing impact. That's when they start saving money because you don't need these giant rewards for these initiatives. They can be smaller rewards as a part of that bigger strategy. So again, what are the top five, you know, uh, initiatives in your company? Maybe it's career growth, maybe it's L&D. If you can
Mhm.
turn those concepts and ideas into incentivizing behaviors and trying to recognize and reward employees to do those things, that's when you can start seeing a lot of impact on driving not just your HR strategy, but what's important to the company.
That's amazing. And I love how passionate you are for what you do, Rob. So I'd also like to touch upon how did you get to doing what you're doing today? Is this something, is entrepreneurship or HR something that, came very naturally to you growing up as well? Or is it something that maybe you stumbled upon in your career, as you mentioned, after Achievers? So, you're basically doing what you love and now getting the tech element to amplify it even more. So, how does it feel, and what's the best part that you enjoy the most about this position right now?
Yeah. So to answer your first part of the question, where it started was, again, dating myself. This is like 23 years ago. Graduated school, was working
You
at
look 23. What are you saying?
I like that. This is going well.
Yeah.
um, I graduated school. I had my, full-time job, and
Yeah.
it was at a small agency that was a lot of fun. But part of that work was actually working one day a week in larger, our larger customers and brand names that you would know and would be familiar with. And when I sat there, right out of school, my full-time jobs versus all the part-time stuff I did, I would sit in these offices and look around, and everyone was miserable. Like literally, no one wanted to be there. They talked poorly of the organization. And here I am, just graduated. I'm like, oh, here's the next 40 years of working full time. Like, can't wait.
Right.
So it kind of hit me that when I thought about all the things I studied, and originally I studied marketing, which was around consumer behavior and why people tie themselves to the brand that they wear. What
Mm,
I cared more about was, well, like, who cares about that? Why do people show up for work? Why do they care about their organization? Why do they give more discretionary effort? And I was like, that's a little more impactful than trying to sell people, a product. What's interesting in that, though, the other major thing I saw is in marketing, there was so much in my schooling around data. We had so much customer data. What's your
yeah.
customer thinking? What are they going to do next? How do you understand? There wasn't social media back then, but what would you understand what the sentiment of their, that your brand is? And I was like, well, why don't we have that for our employees? Right? That they're your biggest, budget line. Why do we have that much
Hmm.
data for our employees? And that's what kind of kicked it off. I kind of left the agency world, and that's when I started kind of the early days at the Achievers crew. And, it's been 22 years later.
Wow, I still can't believe 23 years ago, because I'm not kidding. You don't look over 30 at all. So
I
I think
appreciate
you've
it.
maintained yourself very well during this course of, educating and helping people in careers as well. And what you said, I think keeping a relentless focus on the human centric leadership over purely transactional metrics is what truly allows an HR technology firm to build that genuine multi decade market value. So, thank you so much for that. I'm loving this conversation, and definitely we'd love for you to be back, hopefully, for an in person episode that we do the next with you. But for now, Rob, before we let you go, if there's one final piece of advice that you have for our listeners today, specifically for people in leadership positions who are looking to pass on that morale to everyone else, if you could whisper one thing into their ears, what would you say and why?
Got it. I realize I didn't answer your last question though. So what I will say though, in terms of why do you do it every day? What do you like? It actually gets back to what you just said about the human-centric workplace. I just
Uh-huh.
noticed I'm wearing a t-shirt that has our company passion on it. When we started the company, said we don't want a mission because missions end. We want a passion that is long lasting. And that was
Wow.
to improve work lives. And work is in parentheses because for better or worse, we spend a lot of waking time at work. And what's great is if we can come to work every day and make people's lives better at work, which translates into, most of your waking day, that's
Yeah.
just more of a motivation and passion that the company has. But to answer your final question, maybe one piece of advice, besides recognizing and listening to your employees, I would say as a leader, whether you're an HR leader or a founder, when it comes to this concept of feedback, I would say replace blame with curiosity. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is that it's very simple to not attack, but approach someone to say, well, why did you do it that way? Or this is incorrect. Or, why did you take that approach? Versus a bit of curiosity to say, hey, I noticed this is the approach I was taking. Can I understand your thought process behind it? Right. It's a very different approach where they become part of solutioning. They become a part of helping you understand. And anytime you blame someone, their back gets up, and that's never productive for any conversation, especially from a feedback conversation. So, if you're growing your team or your company, you need people. You still need humans, and I think that's a really good feedback conversation that I've seen work in my career.
Wow. Rob, firstly, thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for improving lives and improving work lives. It has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast, not just because this was, of course, a fun conversation, but also because this is a very candid conversation, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners will relate to on a personal level as well. So, thank you so very much for being here and doing this with us.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun, and appreciate what you're all doing, trying to, you know, um, open eyes and get people up for air to learn new things. So appreciate it.
Definitely. All right. That was Rob Catalano from WorkTango Inc., a masterclass in moving past legacy annual surveys, utilizing AI to generate automated leader action plans, and understanding why a culture of structured recognition projects protects your business growth in 2026. To all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more such resources. To learn more about how we are supporting the ecosystem beyond the platform, please visit the Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smbfoundation.ca. And lastly, a very special thank you to our partners. UPS, our shipping partner, and ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering SMBs across Canada. I'll see you all in the next episode. Kripa Anand signing off.